Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Do we have any regrets this evening? I think we have a full house. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Adams, I'm looking at you.
I don't have anything on this agenda, but at the last council meeting, I'd like to declare on items 1 and 2 of the February 25th meeting, where both of them had items that my wife's company, or the company that my wife works for, TDL Group, came forward with information and concerns.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Thank you. Council, if two of you are willing to provide a motion and a second, Councillor Duddick and Councillor Giddings, we will move into committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed if any? And that carries. Council, I call your attention to the 3 consent items on the agenda, and I look for your... Four. All right, I'll call your attention to all 4 then. Councillor Elgar, since you're the sharp-eyed one, Councillor Elgar moves the consent items. Any discussion, separation? All in favor? Opposed if any? And they are adopted. Then we have a confidential consent item. How do you want to deal with that? Councillor Giddings. Councillor Giddings moves the confidential consent item. All those in favor? Opposed if any? And that carries. And it can now be revealed that the matter that the motion is that the town solicitor be instructed to set out in the February 18th, 2014 confidential legal report, and the matter is the Ontario Municipal Board appeal of a minor variance decision respecting 394 Maple Avenue. And that brings us to our public hearing item, which is the public meeting and recommendation report and the draft plan of condominium for Pineberry Estates. And if you'll give your attention to the pulpit there, Paul, we're all ears.
Thank you, Mayor Burden and members of council. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce the planning application in conjunction with the statutory public meeting and provide an overview of staff's recommendation. The report can be found on page 33 to 54 of tonight's agenda. The subject lands are irregular in shape and slope towards the south. With the exception of the residential subdivision to the north, the subject lands are surrounded by natural heritage features. The subject 63-unit townhouse development is currently under construction. The subject draft plan of condominium application addresses tenure or ownership and proposes to create a common roadway, visitor parking, landscape areas, together with exclusive use areas for 63-unit townhouse development. The Planning Department undertook a circulation of the application to ensure that all technical and financial matters have been satisfactorily addressed. Staff recommends approval of this application subject to the conditions in Appendix A, as the following requirements have been satisfied. The proposed plan of condominium meets the criteria established in Section 5124 of the Planning Act. The proposed plan of condominium conforms to the Livable Oakville official plan and complies with the zoning bylaw. The development has been granted final site plan approval where site servicing, grading, stormwater management, landscaping, urban design, financial obligations were all addressed through conditions of site plan approval. The application for a common element condominium is necessary for providing shared ownership and maintenance of internal site service and amenity elements and is appropriate for the orderly development of the lands. In terms of public comments, they are outlined in Appendix E of the staff report. They were generally related to requests for more details about the proposal, tenure and function of the proposed development, and this has all been addressed as part of the staff report. In addition, a public information meeting was held on January 15th of this year where no members of the public were in attendance. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. When I'm reading the reports, I notice on page 45 of the Appendix B, where Conservation Halton had no objections to the approval of the above-noted draft plan of condominium. And I think if you go back a little bit in history, you'll find Conservation Halton did have huge concerns, but it was actually a council in-camera negotiated deal which had the setback to only 3 meters instead of the regular 7.5 meters. I'm just wondering, like, just for history, if, you know, if we could have maybe going forward, make sure we put things like that in.
We can definitely make a better effort to include that in the background of the staff report. This application's exclusively related to the ownership of the proposal.
I appreciate that. I know it was there was a lot of work going on. The other thing on the policy framework, when you look at the Region of Halton official plan, the sentence, "The lands are designated urban area according to the region's official plan. Lands within an urban area are intended for residential and employment growth." Now, if you look at the regional official plan, it doesn't say that. It says about maintaining high-quality, sustainable natural environment and preserve certain landscapes permanently, in addition to the employment and residential. Like, I'm just wondering, from a template point of view, would it be okay if we change that going forward also?
Through your worship to Councillor Elgar, it's interesting that you raised this point about the template language for the region's comments on the official plan, because as you know, the region recently had ROPA 38 approved in most part by the board, save and except some remaining appeals. I went back in time, and I didn't go back prior to my time with the town, but we've had variations on what that paragraph has said right through from 2008 and to 2009, saying different things in the same way. And so from 2010 until today, that is the standard template wording that is actually picked up when there is no issue or no comments by the region, and it conforms with the plan. So in going forward, we can certainly look at the current wording under section 72 that refers to the definition of urban area. Now, it does have 11 objectives, and our intent was to try and summarize those into the statement that's there. But I understand there may be some specific wording in the first objective that may be more appropriate to provide, so it's more generalized than just the focus on residential and employment. It refers to accommodating growth with that and other means. So we can look at that.
I thank you very much for that. It really is appreciated. I think it just helps people with more clarity that it's just not for employment and residential growth if it's in an urban area. That's the only questions I had, Your Worship. I won't be supporting it just on a consistency point of view from 2002 when this deal was made, because it didn't sit well with me at the time, and it was approved by council, so I know it's going to go through. So thank you.
So, Councillor, I'm not sure that we can take those things for granted. It's hard to predict what council will do. But could you just explain for me what you think this application is about?
Well, this application, when it was all of the monarch lands with the pineberry, and it was to do with a 7.5 meter setback from the stable top of bank. And with a negotiated town settlement, before it went to the OMB, it was agreed it was probably better just to cave and give in on the 7.5 meter setback for this portion of the land. And as far as not approving it tonight, I don't know what you would do if you didn't approve it, because it's already built. Like, everything is built out there, so I don't think it would help.
So this matter is about whether it has condominium tenure?
It will have to have condominium tenure because it would, the width of the streets, I don't think, would allow for anything but condominium.
So if we all join you in a symbolic vote against it, what will happen?
I guess I would look to our staff to tell us what would happen in this case. I can't imagine.
All right. So there's no direct connection between the issue and the issue of the setback and this application?
Well, this is the direct impact of the 7.5 meter versus a 3 meter setback. This is the townhouse, or the condo project that was impacted, the only portion of the Monarch Land Agreement.
So, you're telling me it's already built?
It's not finished, but every foundation is in, and every wall is up, and every roof is on.
And we're going to vote against it.
For consistency, I have to, because I voted against it, and so did Councillor Byrd also voted against it. It was a 9-4 vote that night.
I see. All righty, then, any other members of council? Councillor Byrd.
I guess for clarification, well, of course, the idea, I see how, during the original discussion that we can't talk about, really wasn't this argument, well, this whole thing would be by condominium. The assumption is that it would be somewhat normalized and consistent and compatible with the then normal built form. What now seems to be the normal built form is condominium roads. Now, we term roads, which normally are like other area roads, but when we get to things like this, you now start to use the term roadway. Now, is roadway now of a different, I guess, requirement or standard than a municipal road?
Through you, Your Worship, there are different standards between a municipal right-of-way and a private road. Generally speaking, a private road is significantly narrower.
So the amount of land that would normally be in public ownership, we'll call road right-of-way, is the same, but the actual asphalt width within the right-of-way becomes less? We still have 20 meters or whatever the road allowance is. But this is a condominium road, so it's whatever the condominium corporation can decide on, as long as it meets safety standards, like getting a fire truck up and down it?
For this example, and probably any other one, it's the whole right-of-way that would be within the ownership of the condo corporation, so that would include a sidewalk if that's along it.
Yeah, and
parking.
the right-of-way stays the same. We're talking really road width and the classification of road where it can become sort of semi-private or private to get to, and that's the second part of my question. It says and the areas with the exclusive areas of the condominium. Now, other than the road, what sort of other exclusive areas would the public be discouraged from having access to?
I can show you on this slide. I don't know if you can see the draft plan there. It's washed
Right.
out a little bit on the screen.
Yeah, page 36, right?
Yes, page
Right.
36. The exclusive use areas, that pertains basically to the backyards of the dwellings that are within the condo corporation. So they'd be used exclusively for those unit holders.
Around the whole perimeter of all, or only the ones that are backing on the drain, or the creek area?
It's only the southern portion of the site.
So it's only the setback. Okay, so that's the common element which you'd have to really trespass onto effectively private property to get to it anyway. So that we're not creating sort of condominium parks for neighbors only, but notwithstanding they can put restrictions on use of the road, whether you can park or not park because it's a condominium road, this sort of thing?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'd like, Alan, I'm confused. With condominiums, the Condominium Act was sort of condom elements where there was walls, and it was primarily expected to encourage people to build apartment buildings. Now, somehow, it's morphed itself into a form of, and we see in the previous one here today, where you've got a land division, effectively, a land lot. It was the public storage. The only way you can do it is creating a condominium road off the property that was formerly next door. So you're now getting land division using the Condominium Act, and in this case, we're getting, in fact, a whole subdivision. We've had some smaller ones, and I think Ward, what was it, Ward 2? We've some famous when we had discussion. And we've had it before, and that I know the mayor was involved with the similar application on Lake Shore Road in Oakville as a residence thing, where if we continue on the process from a developer's point of view, why would you go through a traditional plan of subdivision if we automatically kind of buy in on the alleged advantage of a plan of a condominium? And the next step, you would like gated communities. We've had that around before. In fact, I think Fairway Hills was one of the first ones to come forward and said, let's make this a gated community. I just know that sort of a slippery slope. I don't know, pun intended, with all of a sudden we got the setback. I can't remember some of what we negotiated on behalf of giving up that kind of deal. One of the problems is the 7.5 meters that we originally started off is from the stable top of bank. We've got there, it's kind of tough to determine the stable top of bank. But before this council, and some of the Alan will know, and some of the others, we're being sued because, quite frankly, we allowed someone. We give a building permit primarily a number of years ago, not this particular council. Why didn't you stop me? Now we've got a situation kind of there, but we're approving it. And I'll be consistent. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of plans of subdivision using the condominium element for no other reason than to avoid cost and increasing density. So I will make a symbolic gesture and be consistent and not support this application.
Councillor DeMoff.
I do have a question. Since this is already built and the plan is already done, if we were to vote no, what are we voting on here? So if we were to say no, we don't approve this, what would happen next?
So this particular parcel of land is a block within an approved plan of subdivision, and this application for the development, which is built, is to provide for tenure for the sale of these units. If the council were to not approve this application, there's a right of appeal by the applicant, and it would likely go to the Ontario Municipal Board. And it would also delay the transfer of to the purchasers, which I think you'll recall with the Shores was a significant issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple then. I thought I heard something that might be taken to imply that the public were in some way to be barred from the road that we're talking about here. And I understand from other cases that we've discussed previously in the last 8 years that would not be accurate, that the public would still have access to the road. So could the planning staff give us a little explication on what the status of the road would be? I'm thinking of another condominium that tried to put a gate up, for example, and we forced them to take it down. So what is the public's right of access to this road?
So for a private road, and in this case, the public would have access to the development. It wouldn't be a gated community where there's a gate at the front of it. They wouldn't be allowed to do that. If a member of the public wanted to drive down the street, turn around and come out, then they'd be allowed to do so.
So is this application, how can I think of this? I'm trying to think about how to make it clear to the public what we're voting on. Is this about really who owns and maintains the road, the condominium corporation being these homeowners, or us? Is that what this is about?
It's about who owns the property and specifically creating an entity that will maintain the road, that will maintain visitor parking spaces, that would be liable to maintain the retaining wall at the southern section of the site, because things like that are too onerous for a single landowner to do, so that responsibility would be shared across the whole condo corporation.
Okay, so it's basically whether it's town run or condominium run in terms of maintenance. Madam Director, I saw your hand.
Just to clarify, so it's currently privately owned. The question is whether or not, sorry, through you, Your Worship, the question is whether it would be, continue to be owned by one owner and rented, and the maintenance of those elements would be by the one owner, or whether that ownership, as Mr. Barrett indicated, would be shared among the condominium corporation as the entity that would own and maintain those elements.
Thank you. So the decision before us has nothing to do, as far as I can tell from anything I've heard yet, with the setback from the top of the bank, for example.
Well, that issue has been addressed through the approved zoning.
All right. So, and then the other question I had is this particular road substandard vis-a-vis the town's road standards? Is this smaller? Has this generated more units for the subdivision? That's the other complaint that I heard, so I'd like some clarity on that.
So as part of the site plan application, town staff would have reviewed whether essential services can be provided. So that's fire trucks, waste collection, whether there's adequate turning radiuses to get.
So I'm asking a much more basic thing, like if it was a town road, would it be wider and have consumed more land than this is? And if so, what's the change? What's the delta? What's the difference?
The right-of-way would have been wider. It would have consumed more land. In terms of the difference and unit count, we'd have to sit down and draw that out.
Madam Commissioner.
For all intensive purposes, if you were to drive down the road, the width of the pavement would be about the same width of a public road. The difference is that the town owns much farther back in boulevards beyond that, and that would not be owned by the town. That would be owned by the condominium. So for all intensive purposes, the private common element road would look as similar to a public road.
Okay, and one more. So are we, in net, saving some small amount of money because of the shift of maintenance to the condominium corporation?
In the longer term, we wouldn't have to maintain the road, snowplow the road, or any of the other things that we do on public streets.
Thank you very much. I think it's much clearer now. Councillor Elgar?
Your Worship, just have one question of an issue, and I just want a confirmation from Mr. Lambert, maybe that we're not going to have, and I think he knows which one I'm talking about. It's about another one of these condos we have in the ward, where actually the bridge is owned by the condo association, also to their surprise, to every resident that purchased, which not one lawyer picked up on. That aside, that is, since it's private, people cannot walk. Well, I know whether it's been sorted out yet, but there was an issue of pedestrians walking because they had to walk over private property, which is the condo corporation, so it wasn't public. For sure, this isn't the case in this subdivision, Mr. Lambert?
Through your worship, the public would be able to access these lands, walk down the edge of the road to visit the residents in this area because they wouldn't be barred from going through there. Certainly the condominium would have the liability to make sure it's safe and traversable for any public that passes through there, no different. In the case of the condominium that you're referencing to, there was a public walkway that passed through and over the condominium where we secured an easement for making that public passageway happen.
So that has been resolved now also?
On that particular matter, we're still in discussions.
So just to clear this up, what is the status of this bridge? Our position is what, and whose position is that the public can't pass?
On another condominium within Ward 4, the creation of the condominium roadway to access the lands passed over a tributary of the 14 Mile Creek and thus necessitated the need for a bridge to be built to facilitate that
nail down what the relevance of the bridge is and what the facts are about the bridge. Councillor Elgar?
There might be one fact you missed. Who's liable if somebody slips? Until this is all sorted out, who is liable if somebody gets hurt on that private common element bridge area?
Which would permit apartment dwellings up to 8 stories in height. While the new bylaw would permit the built form, density, and height proposed, Site-Specific Bylaw 2014-25 proposes site-specific standards which include requiring commercial uses along the Old Brawny Road frontage, a relatively closer front yard setback for Old Brawny Road, minimum separation distance between the heritage building and apartment building, and minimum yards. The proposed development provides for a compact urban form consisting of high-density residential uses in the form of 2 8-story buildings, which is within the permitted height of between 2 and 8 stories and within the density range of between 100 units per site hectare and a maximum FSI of 4. The proposed development will help implement the streetscape plan as a compact urban form, and high-density residential uses will be transit supportive and provide for efficient use of municipal infrastructure. The building and site environment will be pedestrian-oriented and serve to reinforce the urban edge along Old Brawny Road. Underground parking is proposed with limited surface parking screened from the street by the proposed mixed-use building. And commercial uses along Old Brawny Road will help to create an animated street by providing retail and service commercial uses at grade. The listed brick house will be conserved, enhanced, and integrated into the proposed development, and designation of the heritage building will be required concurrent with the subsequent site plan application. As part of the review of this application, stormwater management, traffic, noise, archaeological potential, site servicing, and road widening requirements were reviewed. As part of Bylaw 2014-25, a holding provision is proposed to address outstanding site servicing and archaeological matters. Required road widenings along Brawny Road and Old Brawny Road will be taken as part of the subsequent site plan application. The noise study found that the proposed development is feasible on the site. Standard warning clauses will be added to the subsequent condo agreement regarding nearby roads and commercial buildings. There are no concerns regarding traffic impact and stormwater management as part of this rezoning application. However, a more detailed review will take place as part of the subsequent site plan application. In terms of public comments received, no formal comments were received from the public regarding this development application. In conclusion, staff is satisfied that the application conforms to the overall policy direction of the Livable Oakville Plan and other relevant policy documents, and recommends approval of this application for the following reasons. The proposed development conforms to the Livable Oakville official plan, satisfies the growth area policies for Palermo Village, including the goals and objectives to develop a transit-supportive, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use community, is consistent with the streetscape plan regarding the provision of mixed land uses and the establishment of a pedestrian-oriented, human-scale environment. There are no unacceptable adverse impacts on the surrounding area. The listed brick house will be conserved, enhanced, and integrated into the proposed development. A full circulation has been undertaken and there are no outstanding concerns. And finally, site plan considerations such as further urban design matters, landscaping, stormwater management, lighting, walkways, and contribution towards the Old Brawny Road streetscape plan in accordance with the streetscape plan will be implemented as part of the subsequent site plan application. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Elgar?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is related to the structural analysis of the barn. I've had some phone calls from people who would like to see it moved in other locations. And I noticed that staff have said it's not structurally sound. I wondered if they had like, who did the analysis? Was it a professional that would be able to speak, support that?
Through your worship to Councillor Elgar, yes, we're satisfied that the structural assessment was prepared professionally. I have actually a copy of it here tonight. I can look it up for you. And we were satisfied. Actually, I was inside the barn and I was a little bit scared when I got up on the second floor. I thought I was going to fall through, but so we're comfortable with the recommendation.
There's no way it could be moved when it's structurally unsound, then, in your opinion, or based on the opinion of the expert?
Again, through you, your worship, to Councillor Elgar, part of the staff recommendations tonight in the report is that we take the elements of the barn and we reuse portions of them for a commemorative structure on site. I've also been talking to people in the last few days, Michelle Knoll actually with the Trafalgar Historical Society, and we're looking to try to use some of the boards for other structures as well. And the applicant's perfectly acceptable with that.
That was actually where it was going to go next. Would the applicants be willing to give some parts of the structure, if they were sound, to, I think it's the Conservation Authority barn that's in a bit of trouble up there?
Yes, I've confirmed that in the last couple of days, and we'll deal with those matters through the site plan and through the permitting process as far as the heritage permits.
The applicant is fine with that, no issues whatsoever?
That's correct.
I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Handis. So there are no changes being done to the heritage home itself, other than what was agreed on through the Heritage Advisory Committee?
Through your worship to Councillor Giddings, the one change that you will see in the report is they're looking to relocate the building on the site, but they're also looking to restore through an appropriate heritage permit, and that will be reviewed by Heritage Oakville.
Thank you. And I see that they have a couple of design revisions. One is to change the cladding of the building that's to be built to enhance, I guess, the old heritage property. I'm a little confused about how moving the building 2 meters closer is helping the building. They're moving the new form 2 meters closer to the road, and they say that that is going to enhance the project somehow.
Through you again, your worship to Councillor Giddings, from our perspective at a staff level anyway, we feel that moving the heritage dwelling closer to the road will actually enhance its presence along the streetscape. You'll notice that in Palermo there's a couple of other buildings that are located very close to the street, and we're looking to do the same with this structure.
All right, last question, I promise. What are they doing with the 2 extra meters? Is it parking? Is it green space? Because that's going to be on the east side of the building in behind.
Through again, your worship to Councillor Giddings, that'll be detailed as part of the site plan, but I fully expect that we'll be looking at streetscape elements, probably landscaping or something to that effect.
Are there any members of the public with information for council? We have a delegation. The applicant is here if we have questions for the applicant. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this matter? Council, do you have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Elgar.
Your Worship, I'd be pleased to move the staff recommendation, and I'd like to say any enhancements you can make to that house would really be appreciated. It's not a pretty sight up there right now, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Madam Clerk? She doesn't need to. She's the applicant. Madam Applicant, would you like to say anything, or would you like to collect your approval? I would just say, your risk.
Is this turned on? Is it turned on already? Okay. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'll just be a moment. Just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening on behalf of New Horizon. My name's Caroline Baker. I'm a planner with GSP. And I did just want to reiterate Mr. Hanna's comments with respect to the barn. The applicant is fully committed to reusing the barn materials, not only in the new proposed building, but also I understand a potential gazebo structure on the property. When Memorial Hall was removed for the new Bronte Road, there was a commitment to build a gazebo to commemorate the loss of that building. And I understand it hasn't been constructive as of yet, and the owner would be more than willing to construct it on this property, adjacent to the relocated Heritage House. Further, with respect to the barn boards, would be pleased to work on donating it to the barn further to the north that has suffered some damage this winter. And also, we've offered to the Historical Society that we'd be happy to organize a site visit. And if there's any materials within the barn that they feel they would like to keep, the applicant would be more than happy to give them those materials.
Thank you very much for confirming the information.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar has moved approval. Other discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That'll bring us to the Trafalgar Road Corridor Planning Study Recommendation Report and Official Plan Amendment. And if you'll give your attention to the pulpit again, we will hear from Gabe Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This presents the final official plan amendment for the Trafalgar Road Corridor Planning Study. The final report for the study is composed of 2 parts and forms an appendix to the staff report in tonight's agenda, starting at page 90. The area of Trafalgar Road that was studied extends from Dundas Street down to the QEW. It is identified as a rapid transit corridor in Halton Region's official plan. It's also the subject of an ongoing environmental assessment. As well, the Livable Oakville plan identifies this area as a corridor to be studied to identify opportunities for future intensification associated with transit improvements. Staff presented terms of reference for the study in February of 2013. We've held 3 open houses. We've provided a preliminary report to council in October of 2013, and a statutory public meeting was held in January of this year. The study process included a review of the corridor to identify sites which had some potential for intensification and were located in areas which could support future transit improvements. Staff examined the physical built context to determine some reasonable land use options, as well as how enhanced design along the corridor could help promote better pedestrian movements and transit use. The study was scoped down from about a dozen candidate sites to 3 specific sites. This culminated in an official plan amendment which addresses these 3 sites. It also provides some enabling policies and direction for future development should it occur along the corridor. So I'll start in the south at the Sheridan College site, site number 4. It does provide an opportunity to create a unique development which can be integrated with the existing college. It is a large site. It does provide some flexibility for future redevelopment, specifically along the Trafalgar Road frontage. There is a large woodlot which separates the college from existing uses south of the college site, and it is a significant destination for a large number of transit users. The official plan amendment that is being recommended maintains the site's designation as institutional, and what it does is it accommodates more intense urban core type uses and building heights. A comprehensive development plan is expected for the development of this site, which will ensure the appropriate transition and building heights for appropriate building heights and uses to adjacent properties. As should be noted, there is in the existing low-density neighborhood to the north of the site. It's expected that building heights in this area would not exceed 4 stories. Some taller building heights could be accommodated between 6 and 12 stories in closer proximity to Ceremonial Drive. And there are opportunities for additional height, which would be subject to bonusing. The next site includes the lands from Glen Ashton south to the Wagaway commercial business. The site includes lands which are also subject to a development application, as well as a remnant parcel from the adjacent Kilbury subdivision. There is an opportunity to wrap new development from Trafalgar Road to Glen Ashton Drive. The existing commercial office building is not proposed to be removed through this process. That was addressed through the in-zone program. And the balance of the site along Glen Ashton can be considered for either residential or commercial uses or some combination thereof. So the official plan amendment recommends designating this area as Main Street 2, which would allow building heights of 4 to 6 stories along Trafalgar Road, but also includes specific restrictions on only allowing residential development right adjacent to along the western boundary of this site, which is coincident with the Kilbury subdivision. Maximum building height there would be 2 to 4 stories. This would allow the new development to better respond to the planned context to the west. The final site is Halton Region's reservoir site, which is currently being decommissioned. There's opportunity here to provide some certainty for future development in built form, should Halton Region decide to sell the site for redevelopment purposes in the future. The official plan amendment recommends designating the area as medium density residential, which is the same designation as the lands surrounding this site. This would allow for townhouse form of development as is currently existing. There are some enabling policies, as I noted, which are part of this official plan amendment for place of worship sites and high-density residential sites. Place of worship sites will maintain their low-density residential designation. However, some intensification of these sites may be suitable in the form of low-medium uses up to a maximum of 4 stories where they're clearly ancillary to the place of worship use. There are lands south of Sheridan College which are designated as high-density, and due to the large property sizes in that area, some intensification would be possible up to a maximum of 300 units per hectare. There are urban design policies recommended, and these are focusing on the public realm, built form and transition, as well as parking. The amendment also will provide an update to Schedule I of the official plan. Any redevelopment along the corridor would be expected to occur through a rezoning process where their supporting studies would be required, and the specifics of future development would be reviewed by town staff and would be subject to a public process. The design direction is contained in the second part of the final report. It is specific to identifying design direction for the future redevelopment of the Trafalgar Road corridor. The direction is provided in 8 transit-oriented development principles which were created in consultation with the town's transit department. The design principles and guidance is intended to help create destinations out of the future transit stops where locations are pedestrian friendly, they have a variety of land uses and densities in a compact urban form that is conducive to walkability. The intent is to create a transit-oriented environment along the corridor that connects the uptown and midtown growth areas. The recommendation associated with the report is provided on this slide. The full detailed official plan amendment being recommended by staff is located at page 161 of the agenda. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Gabe. Councillor Knoll.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered, could you address the correspondence from KLM with respect to the Dunbar application that has been put on our desk tonight? I didn't see this before, so I haven't had a chance to talk to staff about it previously.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what the applicant is looking to do, at least my understanding of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to separate out the specific component of their site, which is on site number 5 as identified. The risk I would suggest in doing that is if there isn't the specific context that we're recommending through the study, then in effect they don't have the land use context necessary based on the proposal that they're providing. They're looking at a high density development designation in essence. And what this does is it provides a little bit more clarity to how that density would work in terms of the built form.
Okay, and also I'm curious why did we not include the public works property in this in the conclusions of the study or in the official plan amendment in the study? Have we already dealt with those issues previously? Is that, and we're satisfied with the extent of that plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We did do the review of the growth areas and provided policies to that effect with the Livable Oakville plan. That said, it is admitted that there is a growth area check-in, we've called it. There may be some further refinement that is done through that process, but that context has been established and we were building off of that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your work on this.
Any others? Councillor Adams.
I don't actually have really a question, but just about the public, the water reservoir site up on Trafalgar. My understanding from having discussed it with staff at the region is that they're positively inclined towards keeping part of that site as a park. And have you had additional discussion with them subsequent to the last meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I personally haven't had any further discussions with Halton Region staff other than they had provided an email, I believe it was the end of January, that said that they were absolutely fine with redesignating the lands for medium density purposes. As you'll note in the final staff report, we would go through with the right process with our park staff through any development application to ensure that the park is in the right size, the right location, that kind of thing.
Okay, and so should the region wish to proceed and wish to, I'll call it sweeten the pot with respect to parkland dedication, we of course would be willing to accept that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would.
Thank you.
It's certainly a council's decision anyway, so, yes. Councillor DeMoff.
My question has to do with Oakville Place Mall. I had brought that up when this came to us before, and I don't understand why it wouldn't be included. It's the closest property to where we're going to be having the whole Midtown core, the transit hub, and I see the reasons here that it's, you know, the mall's in good shape. I just don't understand why we wouldn't be looking at putting higher density on there. We can still require the commercial use that's there now. And the owner has a history of developing malls with high-density residential right above it. So I'm just wondering why this one wasn't included. Of all of them, to be honest, it makes the most sense of any of them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I was just going back to the final report where we did speak to the site on page 102. We did review this site in some detail early on in the process, even going to the extent of starting to model up the site. But as we got a little farther along through the process, it became quite evident that we weren't going to be able to look at this much beyond that initial work, simply because we need to complete the commercial employment study, which is slated to start this year. Once we have a better idea of where that particular study lands, we'll have more context within which to look at this site. It is a regional mall that does form part of the town's commercial hierarchy. As a result of that, we can't just simply blow it up and start again. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to know what that means in the context of all the commercial sites that we have.
One of the meetings that I went to, and it wasn't about this, but we were talking, someone asked a question about the pillar that's in the middle of the QEW and why is it located there. And the response from staff, and I don't remember at the time who it was that was there, said, well, don't forget that we're going to have all kinds of people living right where that is, so it makes sense to have the pedestrian cyclist crossing over there. And that's taking you right over to where Oakville Place is. So where is this high density going at the top, on the north side of the QEW then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's an awful lot of density planned on the south side of the QEW. If the mall were to stay in its current configuration, there's still a need to get pedestrians to the north side, even if the mall itself is a destination. There's also a fair amount of development there currently in a residential form. What that bridge will allow for is easy pedestrian movement back and forth across the QEW without having to go all the way to Trafalgar Road. So it does still serve an important function. If through the commercial study it's deemed that further review of this site is warranted, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, as well, I could add that there's a pedestrian and bike path of sorts underneath the QEW. And back in the day when we got that pillar, that was just a lucky break. The Minister of Transportation was in Oakville, and I was lucky enough to think to ask her to give us that. And in the event, we wound up, all we got was permission to build it ourselves, so it's not like we got a gift, but we did get permission. And so the result is that we're poised now to bring some of the underground traffic, I'll call it, up above the highway, as well as to allow, as the planners have just said, the large number of people to live south of the highway to go over to shop. But I certainly agree with Mr. Charles's response to you that when we get this other study done, it'll be a good time to take a look. And thank you for those questions. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. Through your question, under conclusion, you mentioned that the majority of the corridor between these growth areas can be characterized as one that will not be transitioning to more intense uses in the short to medium term. Just looking at some sort of definition or timelines in terms of a range of dates that would define short and medium term.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's probably the crystal ball answer as well as, I guess, our planned horizon. And I tend to use that, or we tend to use that. And if we take a look at some of the things that we've been doing, like the EA, et cetera, Midtown EA, we project out to 2031. Beyond that is really difficult to start determining what expectations are going to be.
So would 2031 be long-term, or would that be the medium term?
I would put that, through you, Mr. Mayor, somewhere in between the longer part of the medium term.
My crystal ball's as hazy as yours, obviously. So 2031, latter part of...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council with questions? Any members of the public with information for council on this file? Don't be shy. All right, then. Council, time for a decision. Councillor Knoll.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Thank you, staff. Now, Council, that brings us to item number 8, the notice of intention to demolish 66 Howard Avenue. Councillor Giddings?
Move the staff recommendation.
I beg your pardon?
Be happy to move the staff recommendation on Howard.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have no confidential discussion items. The advisory committee minutes are before you. Councillor Giddings.
Be happy to move the advisory committee meetings as well.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Can we have a motion to rise and report? Councillor Elgar, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1, 2, 3, and 4, confidential consent item C1, public hearing item 5, discussion items 6, 7, and 8, and advisory committee minutes item 9, as noted by the clerk. If we could have a mover and seconder for this report, Councillor Duddeck and Councillor Johnston. All in favor? Opposed? The report is adopted. Is there any new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? Council, I have a small announcement. At the next council meeting in 2 weeks, we will have a presentation to honor our veterans for their service in Afghanistan. And veterans throughout the town will be invited to attend to receive council's thanks. And if you have constituents who are interested, it would be great if you could invite them to come along. Anything else, council?
Are we going to get some information on that? Because we'd like to pass it on to some of our residents.
We'll put out an announcement tomorrow morning, and I'll encourage you to circulate it. I apologize that I didn't have something ready, but the discussions with the Legions only came, we only finished them this afternoon. So, if we could have a mover and seconder for the bylaws. Councillor Grant and Councillor Khan, thank you. This is the authority for the bylaws listed in the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.